And we'll put up the statement that it costs more to a business than any other. Well, some of you might be sitting there saying people cost us a lot of money as well. Okay? But I'd still contend that the reason you need so many people often is to manage the inventory. And your people spend a lot of time talking to each other about inventory issues. And because of that, if we can get the inventory right, we can reduce it. So, Will again highlighted some of the issues. Dead stock, only worth the salvage value. No return on investment. We had a customer, Key Plastics. We put in a system. It went in, 16 branches across the UK, about £1.6 million of stock. So substantial value, £100,000 per branch. And it had been in for about 18 months, and the MD rang me up and said, James, need to see you, urgent. Here we are. Went across to him and he said, our stock is higher now, but it's gone up by 100,000. We expected this system to reduce it. So, it wasn't quite the desired result. So we had a good detailed look at what was going on. And they'd set the system up and all the numbers seemed correct. But what each branch manager was doing was taking the recommendations that came out of the system and saying, no, I know better than that. We've always had some of these, we need some of these, therefore I'll reorder it. You have to put some trust in the systems. You have to decide what your policies are. Okay? And for a lot of organisations that are putting these systems in for the first time, that's quite traumatic because they've never formally had rules around how things should go up and down before. And that will take a lot of time and discussion. The Key Plastics story is we said, right, the MD, David, got quite agitated at this point and said, nobody overrides the system. £250,000 out of their stock later, in about 8 weeks late time, no material effect on sales. So effectively, we've taken, put £250,000 in the bank for them, so that's effectively what it was. He was £150,000 up on when the system went in, much better. Another customer, Biazi. Biazi make radiators. You've all seen a radiator. You know that they come in all shapes and sizes. And generally, radiators have brackets to hang them on the wall. So one of my favourite stories was that we've been working there for a couple of weeks, putting a new system in, order processing, and kept seeing these people going down the order acknowledgements, adding numbers up. So I asked a few questions about what they were doing. Standard process is that a plumber's merchant, when ordering radiators, tends to order lots of different sizes because they want the widest possible range to satisfy their customers. And what they were having to do was work out the brackets that went with each particular one and put a summary line on the bottom to make sure they got the brackets for the radiator. That particular organisation had spent about £2,500 a month on carriage sending extra brackets out. Because when you rely on people to do routine, methodical processes like that, they will get distracted and they will get it wrong. And that's no criticism of the people, it just happens. But that really upsets your customer. The phone call saying, the hell are we supposed to hang these on the wall with? Is not a good one, is it? So, a quick change to the system enabled us to put the bracket code against each item and then put a little button on the bottom of the order form that automatically did that process for them. One, it chopped a couple of minutes off putting each order on, and the second thing is it made sure it was accurate and regularly accurate. Now, within 2 hours of discovering that process went on, we got the system doing it for them. Okay, and that saved them £2,000 a month in carriage charges going on. We're now 6-7 years later, so I hate to think what a difference that's made to their bottom line. So, little things like that that will be specific to your company can be all important in terms of customer service. Stop missing those lost sales or disappointed sales. So that's my quote. Your systems often get in the way. My constant experience is that, why do you do it that way? Well, the system doesn't really support what we'd like to do, so we've had to do this, and now we just do this. Okay? And then when the requirement evolves, because let's face it, business is not static these days, another little bit is bolted on around the edge, and you end up with the Excel spreadsheet that somebody has to go in and fill in it every time that particular item is ordered or that particular process is needed to be done. So systems need to be flexible. Okay, you cannot, if you spent months, and this has happened too many times. I can think of one particular organisation that insisted that we spent months mapping every business process they got. And we literally came up with a document that thick. About 3 months later, we were only halfway through the implementation of that system, and we realised that document was way out of date. Because actually, as soon as they started to use the new system, they realised that process shouldn't be that, it should be this. Let's change it. Okay? So you need a system that can constantly evolve with you and can adapt to what you want to do today. And I know that's a twee little phrase, but it will happen. How many weeks go by without you being asked to do something new? You'll have rules. Again, how many of you print out stock sheets on a regular basis? Okay. Or produce Excel sheets of what you have, what your demand is, and so on. When you do those, you get that list, quite a few pages in a lot. What do you do? A number of times I've seen people go down it with a pen or a highlighter and say, that one, that one, that one. Okay? And what you're subconsciously doing there is applying criteria to isolate the dozen products, the dozen components, whatever you want to call it, to identify those that you need to do something about. Okay? So you're having to plough through the whole lot in order to identify what I need to do now, action. Now, what I'm talking about in terms of rules is that often, in terms of what you highlight, you couldn't formally sit down and say, well, I'm highlighting that one because I can see that in 2 weeks' time we're going to have a problem on that. You need to be a bit more formal in terms of that. You need to say, when we have less than 2 weeks average stock, I want it to pop up. Computers work on definite rules. They don't work on subjective judgments. And it's that transition from the subjective to the definite that will cause you a little bit of effort to put together. But doing that, the system should then alert you as soon as that issue comes up. Because the problem with printing that list and highlighting is you do that how often? There's a time pressure. Who in the room doesn't, goes to work and has a couple of hours spare at the end of the day? Not getting many hands there at all there, Will. So, it is a question of how often can you do these cycles of go, look. We need to get the system to tell you. Timing right. It's not just about having the right, we could all have the right stock. Just order a mountain of it and we've got it forever. So, Will is right. Order a little bit and often, but time it right. Okay? Timing. Because if it's a day late, it's too late. That statistic he said about 7% of people will wait for you to supply if you can't do it when they need it for. That's not them being cruel, it's just